We are certainly looking at land now because we've got the sea very well under control.
At 2:15 in the afternoon, 120 nautical miles off the coast of Venezuela, a U.S. Coast Guard MQ-9 Reaper locked onto an unusual formation slicing through the Caribbean. 4 high-speed boats, moving in synchronized formation, carried plastic-wrapped cargo stacked tightly on deck. But it wasn't the drugs that made the drone operator call for immediate confirmation. It was the presence of 2 Venezuelan Navy warships, PO-13 and PO-15, flanking the convoy like armed escorts. In stunning 4K clarity, the live feed showed what should never be seen: a national navy shadowing traffickers through international waters. Subscribe to Military Power, because this isn't just smuggling. This is a national navy working for the cartels. The warships PO-13 and PO-15 were not lost. They were not deceived. They were positioned with precision and intent. Each ship moved in perfect sync with the 4 trafficker boats, taking up a rear diagonal position like bodyguards flanking a VIP motorcade. Their presence wasn't subtle. Gun turrets were uncovered, the 76mm naval guns pointed loosely forward. Radar domes spun in constant motion, scanning for aerial or maritime threats. 50 caliber machine guns remained mounted and operated. This was a combat-ready escort, not an accidental encounter. For the U.S. Coast Guard personnel, watching the stream from the operations center aboard the USCGC James, the situation quickly escalated from unusual to incomprehensible. These were not rogue patrol vessels or misidentified civilian boats. The whole numbers were unmistakable. PO-13 and PO-15 were Venezuelan Navy assets, registered and documented in public defense registries. The flags on the masts flapped clearly in the sea wind. The paint, the equipment, the crew uniforms, everything aligned. These were official warships, and they were not interdicting the smugglers. They were protecting them. The Marines on board didn't hesitate. They had rehearsed this moment for months. Now the script had vanished, replaced by instinct and coordination. Their cargo remained visible. Large, square bundles wrapped in thick plastic and stacked for quick offload. Intelligence estimates would later confirm a shipment valued at over $200 million, destined for offshore transfer before eventual entry into the U.S. market. However, the value was not what made the moment unprecedented. It was who stood guard over it. The drone feed remained locked. Operators captured every movement. On board the James, veteran officers struggled to process what they were seeing. There were rules. International maritime law defined smuggling, sovereignty, and the use of force, but there were no chapters for this. No section in the engagement manual for what to do when another nation's military acts as the muscle for a drug cartel. Intervention was not possible. The Coast Guard cutter was over 50 miles away. It could reach the formation within 90 minutes, but that was irrelevant. Any attempt to intercept or engage would be seen as an act of war. PO-13 and PO-15 were equipped for naval conflict. Each had anti-aircraft systems, surface-to-surface missile capabilities, and reinforced radar-guided fire control. Attacking them without provocation, without incoming fire, would be a deliberate breach of international law. The officers aboard the James were aware of this. Their orders were clear. Do not engage unless fired upon. Document everything. Gather undeniable proof. Confirm identity. Confirm intent. And in this case, intent was visible in every frame. Then the formation wavered. One of the trafficker boats began trailing smoke. Its engines sputtered, slowing to a crawl. The others pressed on. They didn't stop or reevaluate. The protocol among traffickers was simple. If one goes down, leave it. Protect the cargo. Preserve the mission. But the Venezuelan warship PO-15 broke ranks. It slowed, shifted course, and approached the crippled boat. What happened next would be etched into the footage archives of the U.S. Coast Guard and into the memories of every officer who witnessed it. PO-15 stopped directly alongside the smoking vessel. Sailors in uniform, naval-issued combat deck attire, Venezuelan insignias clearly visible, stepped out onto the open deck. Midway through the engagement, the Venom's co-pilot whispered coordinates into the encrypted comms line. Target 2 had just passed into optimal laser range. It took less than 20 minutes. By the end, nearly 2,000 kilograms of narcotics had been transferred directly onto a state-owned warship. From the drone's altitude, every movement was recorded in high-resolution detail. The crew on PO-15 acted with calm efficiency, no sense of urgency, no attempt to conceal. It was a routine operation, one they had clearly rehearsed. No radio chatter indicated distress, no signals for help. This was not a rescue. This was logistics. Once the transfer was completed, PO-15 turned away and increased speed, moving back toward the original convoy. The damaged boat was left adrift. Its job was done. The main shipment had been salvaged. What mattered now was protecting the rest and ensuring the drugs reached their final offshore drop point. At that moment, the mission for PO-15 changed. It was no longer a patrol vessel. It had become a transport ship, one carrying illegal cargo under the authority and protection of the Venezuelan Navy. Back on the James, the mood had shifted from disbelief to restraint. Commanders were aware that legal boundaries had just been crossed, but so had operational ones. They could not chase into Venezuelan territorial waters. They could not fire first, but they could watch, record, and build the case. And they did. They locked onto PO-15 and never let go. What happened next would take the story from betrayal to something far worse. When PO-15 separated from the convoy, it ceased to act as an escort. It became a ghost. Somewhere in the open waters east of Curaçao, the ship dimmed its running lights and changed heading toward the southeast. The move was not random. The course was deliberate. Satellite tracking later confirmed that PO-15 steered directly toward the maritime boundary near Trinidad and Tobago. By midnight, it had reached a fixed point, just 20 nautical miles off the coast. The ship stopped. Its engines dropped to idle. The vessel hovered in near silence, lights off, radar active, waiting. 30 minutes later, movement appeared on the sea. 4 boats emerged from the coastline of Trinidad. These were not large ships, but they were fast, familiar, and approaching with purpose. Each craft cut a clean wake as it powered across the dark waters toward PO-15. The operation that followed was quiet and precise. There was no radio chatter on public channels, no flares, no markers, just boat-to-boat maneuvering in total darkness. The smaller crafts surrounded PO-15 in a loose arc. Ropes were secured. Movement began. The marine layer thickened. Moisture and salt scattered laser energy. Increased power. The battery would suffer as a result. One miscalculation and the missile would never find its mark. He adjusted 3 times. Wind, angle, drift. The moment arrived. With a clean launch tone, the hellfire screamed off the rail. 20 seconds later, it plunged into the vessel's frame, disintegrating it into a column of water, smoke, and metal shards. 6 targets, 6 kills, 12 minutes. This drop was not the first of its kind, but it was the clearest. It erased any argument of denial. The Navy of a sovereign country had just delivered drugs to foreign traffickers with methodical precision. And now, evidence had been secured. Meanwhile, back in Washington, an entirely different mission had been underway. For over a year, the DEA had been running a covert operation. The agent, known only by the codename Neptuno, had embedded himself deep into cartel networks across the Caribbean. His assignment was specific: infiltrate the naval wing of the Venezuelan drug corridor. After 18 months, Neptuno succeeded. He gained access to internal meetings, communications, and payment logs. What he uncovered went beyond the expected. At the top of the operation was Admiral Ernesto Cedeno Tobar, commander of the Bolivarian Navy. His voice was recorded in direct contact with Ismael Zambada, also known as El Mayo, one of the most powerful figures in the Sinaloa cartel. Below Cedeno were 47 officers. Each was responsible for a specific maritime zone. Each had assigned duties, schedules, and payment structures. Intelligence reports revealed a price list. Basic escort duties cost 10% of the shipment value. Add tactical navigation data, and the price rose to 15%. Direct transport on naval ships came at 20%. For high risk or submarine transfers, the fee reached 30%. This was not passive corruption, it was a system. The Bolivarian Navy operated like a private contractor. Their fleet had been repurposed, not for defense, but for trafficking. Naval routes replaced shipping lanes. Military rank provided cover. Cartel money bought silence. As dawn broke across the Caribbean, PO-15 faded from radar. But its actions could not be erased. With every drop, the evidence grew. With every handoff, the network revealed itself. And with every movement, the next layer of betrayal became impossible to ignore. What came next would expose the full scale of this criminal alliance and raise questions the region could no longer avoid. When PO-15 separated from the convoy, it ceased to act as an escort. It became a ghost. Somewhere in the open waters east of Curaçao, the ship dimmed its running lights and changed heading toward the southeast. The move was not random. The course was deliberate. Satellite tracking later confirmed that PO-15 steered directly toward the maritime boundary near Trinidad and Tobago. By midnight, it had reached a fixed point, just 20 nautical miles off the coast. The ship stopped. Its engines dropped to idle. The vessel hovered in near silence, lights off, radar active, waiting. 30 minutes later, movement appeared on the sea. 4 boats emerged from the coastline of Trinidad. These were not large ships, but they were fast, familiar, and approaching with purpose. Each craft cut a clean wake as it powered across the dark waters toward PO-15. The operation that followed was quiet and precise. There was no radio chatter on public channels, no flares, no markers, just boat-to-boat maneuvering in total darkness. These drones could remain airborne for hours, scanning every wake, every heat signature. Vessel that moved outside the shipping lanes. From the Venezuelan warship, crew members lifted the same plastic-wrapped bundles that had been loaded earlier. They passed them down, one by one. The exchange was completed in under 20 minutes. The drone and satellite footage captured everything. It showed state-backed sailors handing narcotics to cartel operatives under the cover of night. This was not a rogue moment. This was organized. The boats from Trinidad sped off quickly. PO-15 remained still for a while, then slowly turned back west. It crossed into Venezuelan territorial waters before dawn. The transfer was finished. From inside its combat information center, commanders can track every aircraft in a 50-mile radius. The Navy of a sovereign country had just delivered drugs to foreign traffickers with methodical precision, and now evidence had been secured. Meanwhile, back in Washington, an entirely different mission had been underway. For over a year, the DEA had been running a covert operation. The agent, known only by the codename Neptuno, had embedded himself deep into cartel networks across the Caribbean. His assignment was specific: infiltrate the naval wing of the Venezuelan drug corridor. After 18 months, Neptuno succeeded. He gained access to internal meetings, communications, and payment logs. What he uncovered went beyond the expected. At the top of the operation was Admiral Ernesto Cedeno Tobar, commander of the Bolivarian Navy. His voice was recorded in direct contact with Ismael Zambada, also known as El Mayo, one of the most powerful figures in the Sinaloa cartel. Below Cedeno were 47 officers. Each was responsible for a specific maritime zone. Each had assigned duties, schedules, and payment structures. Intelligence reports revealed a price list. Basic escort duties cost 10% of the shipment value. Add tactical navigation data, and the price rose to 15%. Direct transport on naval ships came at 20%. For high-risk or submarine transfers, the fee reached 30%. This was not passive corruption, it was a system. The Bolivarian Navy operated like a private contractor. Their fleet had been repurposed not for defense but for trafficking. Naval routes replaced shipping lanes. Military rank provided cover. Cartel money bought silence. As dawn broke across the Caribbean, PO-15 faded from radar. But its actions could not be erased. With every drop, the evidence grew. With every handoff, the network revealed itself. And with every movement, the next layer of betrayal became impossible to ignore. Local media highlighted the drills as evidence of Puerto Rico's strategic importance. Some officials even praised the Navy's choice to stage from here, calling it a clever use of regional assets. Paramedics reported teenagers unconscious on street corners. Emergency staff listed a spike in seizures, hallucinations, and heart failure. By the end of the first week of October 2025, Miami hospitals had seen a 300% rise in cocaine-related overdoses compared to the previous year. The staff was overwhelmed, the morgue was at capacity, and every conversation behind closed doors circled back to the same word: Venezuela. Toxicology reports revealed a disturbing trend. The cocaine flooding Florida streets had a unique chemical signature. It was not Colombian. It did not match old batches traced to Mexican supply routes. Instead, this strain was unusually pure, but mixed with synthetic enhancers that made it far more potent and dangerous. DEA analysts later matched the composition with an earlier seizure connected to a shipment intercepted offshore in 2024. But this time, she added, "It is not a rescue. It feels like a storm coming the other way." In New York, the numbers told a similar story. In October alone, 15 teenagers died from methamphetamine overdoses. Most of the cases occurred within a 3-block radius in the Bronx. Parents, counselors, and school administrators were taken aback. These weren't hardened users. They were high school students. Many of the pills were disguised with colorful coatings. They looked like candy, but they were lethal. Laboratory analysis found traces of the same synthetic blends used in the meth packages seen during the PO-15 operation. Every ton of cocaine or methamphetamine trafficked by sea carries a predictable cost. Even those who trust the military are uneasy about what might come next. The noise of drills is different from the silence before action, and silence, for many here, would be more frightening. The presence of drones and deck gunners may calm some nerves, but for others, it feels like a countdown. They represent real people: sons, daughters, co-workers, neighbors. The shipment, recorded by the MQ-9 drone and escorted by PO-15, weighed 8 tons. That means 160,000 American lives were put at direct risk by a single operation. The psychological impact of these numbers was just as severe. Law enforcement officers who had worked drug cases for decades said they had never seen an alliance this blatant between a sovereign military and transnational traffickers. One official described the operation as state-sponsored death. Behind closed doors, briefings at the Department of Homeland Security took on a new tone. The question was no longer whether Venezuela was involved, but how deep the complicity ran. That question will soon be answered because beyond the drills and worry lies a more dangerous layer: the politics of confrontation and the silence that often precedes a strike. Why weren't the warships stopped? Why hadn't there been a military response? Politicians from both sides of the aisle used the crisis to push their own agendas. Some called for a direct naval engagement, others proposed trade sanctions, but under the surface it was clear that the American public had entered a new phase of awareness. Diplomatic channels moved quickly. In late October, a formal note was delivered to the Venezuelan Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It demanded an immediate end to the use of naval assets for drug escort operations. The response from Caracas was silence, followed by escalation. Within a week, drone footage captured yet another transfer involving PO-13. Venezuela had not paused. It had increased activity. At the Organization of American States, the United States presented its evidence. High-resolution images, intercepted communications, and forensic analysis were laid out in detail. The presentation was meant to isolate Venezuela diplomatically and push the region toward condemnation. Instead, Venezuela withdrew from the session entirely. It was a political rejection that carried weight. Venezuela had chosen to disengage from the regional consensus. With diplomacy failing, the next phase became legal. Federal prosecutors in Miami, Houston, and New York opened 31 sealed indictments. The targets were not only cartel leaders, but also Venezuelan naval officers. The charges included narco-terrorism, transnational organized crime, conspiracy to traffic controlled substances, and money laundering. The files documented a web of coordination. They detailed meetings between cartel emissaries and naval commanders. They included bank transfers, surveillance photos, and eyewitness testimony. The evidence led to the arrest of one senior officer in July 2025. Captain Ricardo Marquez had flown to the Dominican Republic for a private trip. He was tracked, identified, and taken into custody by U.S. Marshals with the assistance of local authorities. Within weeks, he was extradited to the United States. He now awaits trial in Miami, where federal court documents have already confirmed his links to several PO-class warships involved in past operations. Even without missiles or warships, the United States had drawn a line. Its courtroom became a battlefield. Its intelligence agencies became its forward scouts. Every transaction, every radio intercept, every movement of a Navy vessel is now part of a growing dossier. The strategy is clear. Surround the enemy with facts. Isolate them legally. Make it impossible to travel, trade, or deny. And then wait for the cracks to form. But while Washington tightens its grip, the waters remain dangerous. The Venezuelan Navy continues to sail. Cartel shipments are still moving. And the next confrontation may not happen in a courtroom. From the first moment the drone captured PO-13 and PO-15 escorting trafficker boats, the story stopped being about rogue elements. It became something far larger. The transfer off Trinidad, the silent drop in the night. The embedded network of naval officers and the intercepted voices of high command all point to one reality. This is not corruption on the fringes, it is a policy. A national military force is operating in direct service of a transnational criminal enterprise. The Bolivarian Navy is no longer a defense institution. It has become an arm of organized crime. What began as isolated suspicion has now been confirmed through images, audio, intelligence, and blood. This is not about one officer, one ship, or one shipment. It is about a system that allows warships to carry drugs, a system that protects convoys from justice, a system that places profit above sovereignty. The United States is responding. Surveillance flights continue. Satellites monitor every movement. Federal indictments are growing. But so far, none of these actions have stopped the next shipment. None have prevented the next overdose. None have restored the meaning of a Navy uniform now used to shield death. There's still one question that remains. How long will the United States wait before treating this like what it is? A military alliance with cartels is not a diplomatic issue. It is a threat. And threats demand consequences. Subscribe to military power because what started as surveillance now leads to a possible war. And you will want to be here when the truth explodes. In the next report, we reveal how foreign technology is helping these operations hide in plain sight.